Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today, I will be taking a look at Fantagraphics' book Other Stuff by Peter Bagge. This is a just collection of short works from Peter Bagge, mostly from the back pages of Hate Comics and elsewhere. It includes a lot of collaborations with a lot of really huge names. I was a little bit worried about getting some of Badge's work because I mentally associate him with the kind of same time and mentality as Klaus, where it's like this really negative, ironic 90s view of the world. Surprisingly pleased that there's not much of that in here, or where it is, I enjoy it much more than I enjoy like the early 8 Ball stuff. Um, and I think there's some things in here too where Peter Badge is kind of like self-reflecting on the work that he would have been doing. Maybe I just need to get Hate and read through it. I feel like I've read some of it and it had more of that like angsty thing that I don't like so much. Maybe I just need to go back and reevaluate it. So we'll see. But I really enjoyed this one. This there is still some like brutal things going on in these shows. So, like in this one, we have this character Lovey. I'm assuming she's a main character or like a kind of like main side character in Hate. I don't know. Like I said, I need to read that. But we have Lovey is forcing this character Andre into drag and then basically like anally rapes him while he's dressed as a woman. So there is still some like, edgy content like that in here. This story I started to notice, and this is another reason I really need to go like back to look at the rest of Peter Badge's work now, is I really saw for the first time, I guess because I'm paying more attention to shape in cartooning and silhouette, thanks to Sean talking about it a lot through early videos on this channel. I noticed because Badge will go to just straight silhouette sometimes, it then made it easier for me to see how much the skill that he's putting to use here of making all these beautifully constructed silhouettes that also have these beautiful, like every negative space that he creates is like this impeccably beautiful shape on its own. And that is a little bit harder to recognize when you have a more cluttered scene like this that's colored and everything. But when you break it down into just black and white like that, or here like this kind of purpley and white, you can really see it, and then that helped me see it like every other panel is that well composed, and his cartooning allows him to bend and distort the characters to the to make the shapes that he needs to. And as I started paying attention to that, you can see there's so much of this throughout all of his work, whether it be colored images like this with full backgrounds or whether it be these straight up flattened out silhouette pieces, that really that's the core of his cartooning, is his thinking in silhouette like that. And I just like absolutely slobbered over that skill throughout this whole volume. I was thinking, man, this is such a masterful performance in that regard. And so that really, really, it also has me wanting to go back and look at the rest of Peter Badge's work. And then there's just like some of these things that are like grotesque are also like actually just shocking in a funny way, whereas I feel like some other people that are in the same realm as Peter Badge, I don't laugh as much. So like here, and then there was the time I got arrested for stalking Katie Couric. I've had a thing for her ever since they televised her colonoscopy. Like it's so gross, but like I can actually like I feel like I know people who would say that, and like this guy with this weird cinnamon roll nose like saying it while he's chugging beer. Just these characters are like scumbags, but there's like a humor in it that is, I don't know, it's just a little bit different. Know someone else I think about a lot, like in this, is Ivan Brunetti, like who just really, and R. Crumb, where they really lean into their filthy, and Gilbert Hernandez does it, and like Blubber, that kind of stuff. Pete Badge is like right on the line, at least in this book, where I can enjoy it. But he does oftentimes also sell the like teenage dirtbag, 20 something dirtbag, like party lifestyle. Even though he's showing the negative consequences and poking fun at it, he also is glamorizing it to some extent. Like this character being so sick, she barfs all over herself and is like running around and they're having a party. And, you're thinking, God, like what an awful, terrible life. But then at the same time, it's kind of presented as like, yeah, but what a fun, like YOLO life. Like you live your life, you know? And I just don't get it. That's just not me. It's not my personality. I'm glad people have spaces for that in the world, but it's just not my thing. And I'm always astonished when people are putting it out in a piece of art as like a desirable thing, even if it's just an accurate portrayal of the life that they have wound up in. It always is funny to me. It's like, you don't want to have like nice house and stability. Okay, cool. Like, you know, no big deal, but I just don't get it. This story here is also, there's a lot of like little one pages in here and whatever. This one's about people that are taking some shrooms and going out into the woods, and they're having an argument about whether gnomes are real. So just some funny little things in here. This story has Little Richard and Buddy Holly having a gay affair together. I don't know if that's like an actual rumor or not, but I thought that was pretty funny. That they're both kind of trying to have a threesome with this chick together, but then they wind up in bed together and stuff. I don't know if they were known for doing that or not, but it's interesting. These are presented as musical urban legends. These ones here, the gnome one is one of those as well too. That this is supposedly a story that happened, out on someone on tour. So there's a bunch of these from like smaller name bands or just general band myths that you hear, and then actual like big name people. So this must be an actual urban legend, and I'd be curious to know how verifiable that is or not. This story is more autobiographical. I don't know the history of that time so well, but they're name dropping Bruce Pallet and Sub Pop. I'm pretty sure Sub Pop Records was part of like the Seattle scene with Fantagraphics, and then you have Bagge and Clouds. I think they were, from my understanding of that, and this is in 1995. So it's kind of showing meeting this character who went on to become influential in the music scene, but at the time he was kind of annoying. So it's that kind of like little autobiographical thing was interesting. Then we get to a section where there's a bunch of collaborations with a bunch of like the biggest name people from the 80s and particularly 90s comics art. So you get this one, which is called Me, and it's obviously a collaboration with Gilbert Hernandez. Each panel is like a quote, all quotes inaccurately recalled by Peter Bagge. So these are quotes he's heard somewhere and then he's recalling them. So it's not really a comic story so much as just a series of quotes that Bagge has recalled inappropriate, like, recalled with some level of fidelity or not, we don't know. And then Hernandez just gets to come in and kind of draw the scenario for that. So it's not a story so much as a collection of like one-page strips. There's a story in here, again, kind of on the musical legends line, where there's a story about Alice Cooper stabbing himself in the leg with a sword that he owned that used to be a sword Errol Flynn used, and then continuing a performance. I looked that one up online, verifiable that Alice Cooper claims this, but I couldn't find anything where anyone else said, oh, I remember seeing that, or there were photos of it or anything. So an interesting story. I hope it's true. He's pretty badass if what's in the story is entirely true. So that was fun. And this one was written by Alice Cooper. It was a collaboration with Alice Cooper. Then you have a collaboration with Adrian Tomine, that's at a convention, and it's making fun of the autobiographical cartoonist. So it's taking a lot of the shots at autobiography cartooning that I have a problem with, but then it's so also like ironically name droppy, like there's Gary Groth and Fantagraphics, and you have this guy, this squid guy running around, and there's so many things where they're referencing themselves, Tomai, Badge, like, oh, this, like, they're telling this squid guy, you just look like a Dan Clowes knockoff, things like that. They accuse me of ripping off Chester Brown, and so it's all things that they probably actually did encounter, but at the same time, they're like kind of intentionally, ironically committing the sin as well. That's one of the things that I have a harder time with in that time frame, is I'm not such a big fan of like ironically doing the thing that you hate. I'm not too into that. Then we get a story. This one was really surprising to me. A story by Alan Moore, written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Pete Badge. Again, it's coming from this like ironic deconstructionist point that Alan Moore takes a lot of the time. But actually, once you read it, you realize like, this is actually Alan Moore doing what Alan Moore should have been doing all along, which is being an underground writer. Like, he was just someone who was doing that. Like, the mainstream let him come in and run roughshod over all of their properties and picking them all apart. But you think about like if Watchmen had been drawn by someone like Bagge or Clowes, like it probably actually would have got the intent of Alan Moore across a little bit more. I think with Dave Gibbons, there's like the loving tribute to superheroes aspect of it, and the satire aspect of it is not as on the surface as it would be if someone like Badge or Clowes drew it. So this, where they're like doing a deconstruction of the Kool-Aid Man and eventually tying it to the Jonestown massacre, like that it becomes like this documentary where he's talking about how everyone talks about how you drink the Kool-Aid, but it wasn't really Kool-Aid. It was something. It was Flavor Aid that they drink. Like, I don't know. It's just kind of a funny story, and it really shows, I think, Alan Moore doing what he was most meant to do. There's also just some crazy writing in here where he says, "What happens next? I swear this is true. Hunter S. Thompson held me down while Wolf pissed into my head." The pissing it, like, so just that also that kind of vileness, that evil intention towards other people that Alan Moore seems to have in a lot of his work shows up in here. So surprisingly, these two work very well together and made me rethink like the type of collaborators that Alan Moore have. He maybe should have spent more time with these underground guys. Then you get the Clowes Badge collaboration, and this one I just was thinking a lot about. These are like people who grew up on EC Comics, Mad Comics, and New Yorker cartoons before they became pros, and so they were really seeing comics as art, which is true, but they were coming at it from generations of pop culture. And then they, like Clowes and Chris Ware, I say they took comics to art school, where they have studied the classics of this medium, but they don't seem as exposed to the art side of it. And so like seeing this collaboration between them kind of highlighted that for me, that it really seemed an approach like a mix between Mad Magazine, like the kind of I don't know, the flavor of the EC or the ethic of the EC, the kind of social satire picking apart of some of even the horror stuff in the EC, then the Mad stuff, and then the New Yorker type of cartooning, like on the surface of things. Of course, because he's working with Clowes, the combination of their like ironic, detached existentialism comes together and makes this a story that's not my favorite one. Oh, well, we might as well enjoy ourselves while we can, because this ain't gonna last. This country is doomed. Western civilization is doomed. Da da da. And like that could all be well and true. Like I feel like that most days with the AI stuff. But this idea of the world is ending. It's our fault. None of us are gonna change ourselves to fix it, though. It's also true. But then, like, the story itself, instead of offering solutions, is just like a cop-out. Instead of like, okay, well, at least I can live my life according to the principles that I wish everyone, if everyone lived this way, the world would be a better place. Instead of trying to enforce it, and instead of just giving up, just choosing to live it that way yourself, even though it may be disadvantageous because other people aren't going to play by the rules. I don't know. There's just a cop-out in a lot of this stuff from that era that I don't like. Then you get a collaboration with Johnny Ryan doing a spot on Scott Adams here, as we get Dildo Bert and Al Qaeda which is, again, a pretty funny one. A story written by Pete Badge but drawn by Danny Hellman, so kind of like an American Splendor type setup there. But instead of meeting Harvey Pekar, he goes and he meets the late great Harvey Kurtzman, and you learn about Kurtzman's kind of ethic in life and everything. And it just justified, like, I'm sitting here reading these and going, okay, these are all the guys that grew up on EC and Mad. And then, yeah, like he's worshiping Kurtzman here. And so you get some good like advice built in from Kurtzman, which is fun. Then you get a collaboration with Crumb where they're making fun of Kathy. It's called Kathy. And this is a pretty perfect collaboration. I really do think that in all of these collaborations, Pete Badge has figured out exactly, like, is he the writer or is he the artist? The content of them are all like the perfect intersections of his interests and what's going on with the other artists. So here you get the satire, but then you also get Crumb gets to draw his big thick-assed women and stuff like that. So it's a pretty fun collaboration there. Then you get a one-pager called The Action Suit Story. This looks to be like an ad for the band that Pete Badge was in at the time, and it looks to me like it's drawn by Jaime Hernandez, but I don't see his signature or anything on there, but it looks like a collaboration between them. And then you get some other ones collaborating, a character named Jim Blanchard, who seemed like he would have been a big character in the scene at the time that everyone knew that was kind of a wild guy, but I don't know him for context. Then we have some series of like scientific discovery little articles. So Pete Badge has like expanded out past the like ironic complainy thing, and he's doing these ones that are like urban legends of mythology, like cool, interesting facts about science. Like this one is the history of nylon. Like I never knew about this. This is an interesting thing that he's told me about. I feel like there's a lot of stuff in this book where it got me interested that I'd want to go and research it a little more. There's another piece that's autobiographical about going to a comedy festival. It's really interesting because of the time that it was at. Some of the people being mentioned I've never heard of, but then some of the people are people who would have been coming up, like Margaret Cho would have been coming up but weren't like huge yet. And so to see like someone reporting at the time, or like here you have David Cross, like far before he would have been famous from Arrested Development and stuff. So it's interesting to see that on the spot at the time. It's like going back and being like, oh my God, Jack Black was in that one Pauly Shore movie, Biodome. Things where you've seen people before, but then they become famous later. That's kind of how this one feels, which is pretty cool. There's another like autobiography story here about being at a party where Dick Cheney's at. This is like definitely once you enter to a certain echelon of like cultural producer, I'm assuming. I don't know. I'm not there yet. I doubt I ever will be. But where you wind up at places where there's people like Dick Cheney, it's a really wild thing, like, and Badge having to like hold his tongue throughout there is really interesting. Then there's the more complainy stuff on this side where we have like this pet peeves, but he's complaining about people like having linguistic habits and phrases that come and go, and he's tracking that like as a cultural thing, and also tracking like how the distortion of our language and the downplaying of our language can be a culturally bad thing. Like what's with this recent excessive use of qualifiers like kinda and sorta? Professional newscasters suddenly sound like 13-year-old girls. I'm reporting to you live from New Orleans, where the aftermath of Katrina is sort of a disaster. And I've definitely found that I have been infected by these things. I'm sure you all hear it on the channel as well, but I know I say kinda a lot. And I used to say that to students to try and soften the blow, and I'm trying to remove that now. And also trying to not say, hey, awesome job. I'll try and tell them good job, because like awesome should have power still. So he's like talking about that. And I think that's an interesting just topic for anthropology and linguistic studies and stuff. Then here you get some of this looking back. He's looking back like 20 years later or so, looking back at Weirdo, and like I predict the 90s will be the I wish I was dead decade. Did I really write this? What was wrong with me? So he's talking about like I'm glad, like why didn't someone, I'd be amazed someone didn't pull me out of my misery given the comics I was making. When I reread them today, I'm amazed someone didn't pull me out of my misery. So I feel like he's, I don't know, this seems like someone who's grown more, and that makes me very interested to go back and read the early stuff. And then a really funny series of stories here about learning to deal with like the internet coming into your life as the internet came in and became like this addictive thing. And this like, are you done yet? Can I get back on my computer? Like you're taking forever. And I think that's something that people of my age, and I can imagine even people like Badge who are definitely probably at the forefront of the Gen X, and I'm at the very tail end when it turns into millennial. That must have been a really strange thing for them because they were older when the computer came in the house. For me, it was like 15, 16. So I knew the world without it, but it was natural. And I definitely still got addicted, but I wasn't getting addicted to it at the time where I had like a life to live. I was still a kid. So it's an interesting peek at that. And I feel like that's the strength beyond the like silhouette based shape kind of mastery that's all throughout Badge's stuff. I feel like his writing is still super critical and skeptical of society, but I also feel like there's a heavier dose of like intellectual curiosity in what he's doing that makes his kind of ironic, existential, angsty stuff, at least in this collection of things, it makes it more palatable to me because it's coming from a place of like legitimate, open-minded curiosity, skepticism, instead of like a more closed-minded, just ironic, like self-obsessed type of place. So really enjoyed these, and really surprised and surprised by and enjoy a lot of these collaborations. And I think this is really incentivizing me to go back and look at Badge's other work, even though I realize it may not be flavor-wise my thing. I'm respecting him as so much as a cartoonist, I still want to check it out. The Eisner nominated The Strange Death of Alex Raymond by Dave Sim and myself. This is a gorgeously illustrated and designed book. Dave doing most of the illustration. Amazing compositions throughout. What Dave is doing is he's recording his obsession with the death of master cartoonist Alex Raymond behind the wheel of Stan Drake's car when they got into a car crash. The best description of the book that I've heard is that it's like understanding comics with pages like this mixed with something like From Hell when you get into the theories about what actually happened with the car crash. And then with Sean on production, it's just one of the most gorgeously printed books you could get a hold of.